They say blood is thicker than water. But in my house, blood felt like cold glass, clear enough to see through, hard enough to bruise, and always between me and the people on the other side. Some nights I think my first mistake was simply being born in the wrong home. I'm not telling this for pity. I'm telling it because the scar won't sleep unless I speak. Pain has a way of owning you when you keep it in the dark. So I'm opening a door, just enough for the light to find me. From the sidewalk, our place looked warm. A narrow two-story house with a maple tree leaning over the porch like an old friend. A crooked gate that squeaked, a living room window that went soft and gold at dusk. Neighbors nodded and said we were a good family. My father worked at the county office and never missed a bill. My mother remembered church bake sales and who'd had knee surgery and which casserole to deliver to which grieving home. My older brother, Jacob, hung ribbons and medals on the wall like framed sunshine. My little sister, Lily, had cheeks made for pinching and the kind of laugh that made even tired people smile. And then there was Mimily, the space between two portraits, too big to be carried, too ordinary to be displayed. Middle child jokes are supposed to be harmless? What no one warns you about is the quiet, the kind that turns you into furniture useful, ignored. Impossible to imagine leaving a dent. Birthdays taught me arithmetic. Jacob's parties meant balloons and boxes, loud ants and camera flashes. Lily's meant princess cakes, sparkly dresses, the whole house smelling like frosting and sugar. Mine meant, if remembered at all, a candle pressed into a muffin. My mother already reaching for a sponge while I made a wish I didn't dare say out loud. When the flame went out, the room didn't change temperature. I learned to blow and clean my own crumbs. I collected small victories because the big ones seemed reserved. When I was 12, I won second place in a city essay contest. I ran home clutching the certificate, ink still warm, ribbon scratching my wrist. Second, my mother said, scanning it like a receipt. Well, Jacob took first in math that year. The sink hissed back to life. My father didn't look up from the news. That night I tore the certificate into ragged strips and buried them at the bottom of the kitchen trash under coffee grounds and eggshells. I tied the ribbon around my ankle under my sock and wore it until the dye bled into my skin like a secret bruise. It was proof that once something I did tried to be bright. You can forgive 1,000 little cuts when you believe mourning might be gentler. But one night at 16, I learned there are wounds daylight won't seal. The walls in our house were thinner than they looked. I'd gone to bed early to study, the pages of my biology book fuzzy with exhaustion, when my parents' voices floated up the stairwell and sat on my pillow like a cold hand. She doesn't feel like ours sometimes, my mother said. Her voice wasn't cruel. It wasn't anything. It was the tone people use when noting the weather, factual, distant, undebatable. Maybe that's why I can't love her the same. My father didn't defend me. He made that sound he made when football commentators said something obvious. The ceiling tilted. The maple's shadow scratched across the wall. I shoved my face into the pillow until I tasted dust and fabric and the salt of my own mouth. I didn't make a sound. A stranger in her own family learns early how to scream without air. After that, I stopped offering my heart like a plate of cookies no one asked for. I learned to do chores without commentary, to take up less space than my body took up, to leave rooms 2 minutes before the comparisons would arrive. I did not forgive them. I also didn't know how not to love them. Both things lived inside me like neighbors who never met. That summer, I got a job at a diner 2 blocks over. The owner, Miss Carter, was wiry and kind in the way of people who had worked through more than they would ever say. "You're quick," she told me, teaching me how to balance 2 plates in one hand and a coffee pot in the other. "And you watch the room. Most people never learn that." "Watching is what I'm best at," I said. And for a moment I felt seen in a way that didn't hurt. She let me eat the staff meal and kept a stool in the back by the walk-in cooler. "If you need quiet before you go home," she said, "pretend you're counting straws." Sometimes, after closing, I did exactly that, sat on the stool in my apron, breathing in the metallic stillness, counting plastic sleeves and pretending Each number was a minute. I didn't have to be anyone's disappointment. When I left, Miss Carter would hand me a container wrapped in foil. "Meatloaf's better the second day," she'd say. "Tell your mother." I always set it on the counter with a note and climbed to my room without waiting for thanks. Lily wouldn't let me be furniture. She knocked just to braid my hair, just to show me a drawing of a house with a tiny window labeled M's window, just to whisper questions like they were secrets. "Why don't you smile a lot?" she asked once, perched on my bed like a concerned bird. "If I smile too big, the hurt might fall out," I said before I could stop myself. She took that seriously in the way children do when they decide to believe you. She started saving stickers to keep the hurt in. She stuck a silver star on my wrist before school and another on my pillow at night. I kept them until they curled. Jacob was kinder than he was careful. Success fit him like a jacket tailored to his shoulders. He didn't know how to hold his brightness without casting a shadow, least of all on me. "You just have to want things more," he'd say, as if wanting had ever been my shortage. But he gave me a ride to the bus station the day I left for college, thumped my shoulder, and said, "Call if you need money." I didn't. Needing had never worked for me. The city swallowed me in the best Wakelandly completely. I rented a small room with peeling paint and a window that let in the smell of rain. I bought a kettle and a second-hand lamp and 3 plates, because 3 felt generous. I worked 2, then 3 part-time jobs. The diner, an evening shift at a bookstore, and weekend babysitting for a woman who taught violin and paid me in leftover lasagna when she was short on cash. I learned how to be hungry and fine at the same time. I called home on Sundays. My mother answered half the time. My father asked if I needed winter tires. Jacob texted link after link to articles about productivity like encouragement could be downloaded. Lily sent voice messages full of giggles and out-of-breath excitement, and a careful question threaded through. "When are you coming home?" "Soon." I always said, soon, like a promise I might someday mean. When I did go home for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, once, briefly, for my birthday the house smelled the same. Lemon cleaner, laundry that almost, not quite, dried, and whatever, was simmering on the stove. My mother looked at me like a deadline she'd forgotten about. "Oh," she'd say, "you're here." She didn't hug me. Neither did I. We both knew how to keep our hands to ourselves. On Christmas Eve, my first year away, I gave her a wooden hair clip carved into a leaf so delicate it looked like it might lift and fly. It was the kind of thing I would have chosen for myself, because I didn't know how to choose for her. She turned it in her fingers. "Pretty," she said. "It might break." I told her it wouldn't. I wanted at least one thing between us to hold. That night, after everyone slept, I climbed the pull-down attic stairs to fix a latch that stuck. The attic held the breath of seasons, boxes of outgrown clothes, a cracked crib, the stroller with a wheel that always squeaked, an old wardrobe, leaned in the corner like a tired man. When I opened it, the hinge wailed and then relented. Inside, behind a row of coats, smelling faintly of cedar and dust, sat a green metal box with rusting edges and a dented lid. Some boxers invite you to wonder. This one dared me. I didn't open it. Not then. I closed the wardrobe, fixed the latch, and climbed down, palms dusty and heart loud. I dreamt of a key with my name on it and woke up with the taste of iron in my mouth. 6 months later I turned 20. The number felt like stepping on a certain kind of sidewalk, crack. Nothing changed, and yet your body braced for it anyway. I bought myself a cupcake from a bakery that charged extra for sprinkles and ate it standing on the curb. When the sugar was gone, the ache wasn't. 2 weeks after that, on a hot Saturday, trembling with electricity from a stubborn storm cloud, I took the bus home without telling anyone. I didn't even know why until I was pulling the attic cord, and the stairs unfolded with their familiar groan. I opened the wardrobe. The box was still there. The lid wasn't locked. Inside lay a hospital bracelet gone brittle with time. A photograph of my mother at 18, in a dress that made her look like a poem. Several envelopes tied with a frayed ribbon. And one more, smaller, with my name in careful script. "Open when you are 20. My heart did the thing where it sounds like footsteps running toward you and away at the same time. The envelope had waited for me longer than anyone ever had. I slid my finger under the flap like I was afraid to hurt the name, and unfolded a letter written in a hand I didn't recognize. Patient, steady ink. Emily, my dear, if you are reading this, it means you are 20, and I have kept my promise to let you be old enough to choose what to do with the truth. It was from my mother's older sister, Aunt Grace. She wrote about being 17 and pregnant, about a boy who left when she told him, about shame that grew beside hope and devoured it mouthful by mouthful. She wrote that my mother stayed with her through the labor, held her hand, and when I was placed on Grace's chest, tiny and loud, my mother said, "Give her to me. I can raise her. You can finish school. We will tell them she is mine." I belonged to this house first, as a promise. For my mother, it seems I never entirely arrived after. Grace wrote of leaving town to finish school, of sending money when she could, of letters that trickled out and then stopped when she realized every page reopened a wound without healing. Your mother, she wrote, loves you the way someone loves a mirror that won't show their reflection. She tries and fails and grows angry with the glass. I am sorry I gave her the mirror. The last paragraph was smallest, written as if the ink itself was tired. If you hate me, I will deserve it. If you look for me, I will be grateful. If you do neither, I will understand. I have loved you from far away in the only way I knew, by not breaking your life more than it already was. I sat on the attic floor with the letter open and the box like a mouth gasping beside me. The bulb overhead flickered, practicing not failing. Somewhere below, cutlery knocked against plates in a rhythm I'd known all my life. I imagined my mother at 18, at 28, at 38, carrying a lie like a sack she refused to set down. I imagined myself at 5, at 10, at 12, offering certificates to hands already full. I put the letter back in the envelope, back in the box, closed the lid, closed the wardrobe, pressed the attic door shut. I didn't tell anyone. Not then. I carried the truth downstairs, pressed it under my tongue, and tried not to choke. Some truths make monsters. This one made a map. If you're waiting for a dramatic dinner confrontation, that's not the story I have. This isn't a movie with music that swells and a speech that untangles decades. What happened instead was quieter and, in its own way, heavier. I avoided home. When I couldn't, I watched my mother the way you watch a small bird fly again and again into the same window. You start to pity the glass. I tried to be kinder. I failed in ordinary, human ways. Kindness is a muscle, and mine had been protecting bone for too long. Then my father had a mild stroke. Suddenly, there were hospital schedules and insurance forms and a shoebox of receipts that needed to become a list. Jacob's job swallowed his hours. Lily had exams and a heart that couldn't be in two places at once. My mother spent days in the hospital and came home at night with hands that shook at strange moments, counting pills, pouring water, tearing lettuce. I took the night shifts. I slept in a plastic chair by my father's bed, counting his breaths and the slow travel of the minute hand. Sometimes he woke and studied my face with the look of a man who knows there are answers but not which question to ask. Sometimes, when a nurse adjusted his pillows, he whispered, "Good girl, the way you speak around a habit." I decided not to be particular about which daughter he meant. I took what arrived. One evening, my mother came in carrying a paper bag that stained with oil at the corners. "Eat," she said, setting a sandwich on my lap, already split in half. "You look thin." We watched the heart monitor blink like a green firefly. After a while, in a voice that came from somewhere I hadn't seen in her, she said, "I found your hair clip. The wooden leaf it holds." She touched it at the back of her head like proof. You can go years starving for one gentle sentence and discover it isn't enough to feed you, but it still slides under your ribs and warms a corner. I ate the sandwich. "Where did you get the green box?" I asked, the question leaving my mouth before I could call it back. "In the attic." "What box?" she said reflexively. Then her eyes did a small, visible math. "Emily, I put everything back," I said. "I didn't take anything." I almost added, "I didn't take the letter with my name." As if truth could be SHOPLIFTED. She looked at the window. The hospital's lonely palm dragged its fronds along the glass, like it was practicing intimacy. "We were going to tell you," she said, and maybe for some version of we, and some version of tell, that was true. "When you were ready." "I was 20, I said. "And a letter told me I was ready 2 weeks ago." Her hands there work rough, bone-thin geography folded together until the knuckles went pale. "I took you," she said, meeting my eyes at last. "I fed you. I kept you warm." The list sounded like a bill, rather than a memory. But every day I looked at you, I saw your aunt's mistake and my own. I am not proud of this, but it is true. Sometimes love wears a mask so long it forgets its own face. Sometimes it takes a stroke and a half sandwich to lift the edge. We didn't hug. We didn't forgive. Something else happened, small, quiet, the size of a breath drawn without flinching. A ceasefire. My father came home weeks later, slower and softer. He called me kiddo twice in one day and didn't seem to notice he'd never said it to me before. Peace isn't always a parade. Sometimes it's a kettle boiling while no one raises their voice. Then came a different kind of paper. The sale of my grandparents' old lake cabin. It had sat empty for years, a place with peeling paint and a dock that leaned toward the water, like a tired man. When it finally sold, the money was to be divided among the children, which in our branch meant my mother and her siblings, and by the language of the will, the heirs named by law. Laws are precise about things families often fudge. The lawyer, neat in a gray suit, slid his glasses down his nose and said, "In your household, that would be Jacob and Lily. 2, not 3. The word pressed into me like a thumb on a bruise. My mother's mouth went into a line that could hold nails. My father coughed as if there were a fishbone in his certainty. Shame rose up fast and foolish, the kind that turns money you never counted on into evidence you'll never count at all. Before I could pretend it didn't matter, Lily said, "That's not right." She sat up straight in a chair, too big for her. "There are 3 of us." Her voice didn't shake. "If the paper can't count, the people can." Jacob, who hates messes when they are emotional, rather than physical, looked down at his hands for a long second. Then he said, "Split mine 3 ways." He cleared his throat. "Do whatever the form needs, but that's what I'm doing." The lawyer explained beneficiary rules and tax implications and why the form had to say what the form had to say. In the end, the money came into checks, and those 2 checks became 3. It wasn't about the amount, it was about the arithmetic. Finally, including me without forcing me to raise my hand. That night, in my small apartment, I cried the way people cry over births and funerals and weddings and other crossings. It wasn't joy and it wasn't grief. It was a river that had been dammed too long, deciding to remember it was water. You might be wondering about Aunt Grace. So was I. I wrote her a letter, not because I knew what to say, but because silence had taught me what it does. I wrote, "I found your letter. I am 20. The truth hurt like a shoulder popped back into place, worse for the second, better for the rest. I don't hate you. I don't entirely understand you. I think both are honest." 2 weeks later, a postcard arrived with a picture of a bridge I'd never stood on. On the back, in that same careful hand, "I am here. I am sorry. I am proud of you, in the only way I know, by not asking for more than you can give. If you want to meet, write again. If you don't, keep the card. It will prove I existed." We met halfway between cities at a cafe that smelled like cinnamon and something older, regret, maybe, or forgiveness waking up. She was older than the girl in the photograph, of course, but her eyes held the same stubborn gentleness. She stood too fast when she saw me and almost knocked over her tea. We both laughed at the same time. It sounded like a door we had both been leaning against opening toward us. Double quotes high, I said. My voice was not steady. I decided not to be embarrassed by that. "Hi," she said. "You look like your mother and not like her at all." We did not try to rewrite history in an afternoon. She didn't ask to be called anything she hadn't earned. She listened more than she defended. She told me the truth without trimming it. Before we left, she handed me a scarf she'd knit herself. navy so dark it almost went black. For when the wind is loud, she said. It's loud a lot, I admitted. Then wrap it twice, she said. On the bus home, I pressed my face into the scarf and let it absorb what it could. If this were a different channel, maybe this is where I'd tell you my mother and I made soup and laughed so hard we cried and then hung my lost baby photos in the hallway with applause. That didn't happen. What did happen was smaller, and it mattered anyway. A month after I met Grace, my mother called me into the kitchen. She slid the letter across the table. Keep it, she said. You'll take care of it better than I did. She smoothed her hair with a familiar gesture, and my breath caught when I saw the wooden leaf clip catching the light. It still holds, she said, almost smiling. We still stumble. Holidays are careful. Silence is still a room we spend too long in. But sometimes my mother texts me a picture of a recipe and writes, "You might like this. Too much ginger." Sometimes she calls and asks a question and lets me answer like I'm the kind of person whose opinions matter. Sometimes we talk about the weather the way people do when they are tired and trying and don't know how to begin again. Jacob sends me links to cheap flights and never says the word inheritance. He asks about my job, my ankle ribbon of a scar, the kettle that boiled itself to death last winter. Lily comes over with nail polish and gossip and says, "You smile more now." It makes the room feel less haunted. Ms. Carter sold the diner to a couple who treat me kindly for her sake. On her last day, she pressed a key into my palm. "To the roof," she said. "When the world is loud, go up. It won't fix anything, but it makes the sky feel closer." Sometimes, on that roof, I look at all the windows glowing in all the other buildings and wonder how many strangers are eating at their own tables. How many daughters are learning to breathe in houses that don't know their names? How many sons sit quietly doing math with their worth? I wonder how many secrets go to sleep and how many wake, hungry. I don't forgive everything. I don't forget. The scar is not a door you walk through once and find yourself on a beach. Some nights it still presses its thumb right where the bone meets the fear. Some mornings I wake with the taste of attic dust in my mouth. But here is what I know now. Family is not who shares your blood so much as who shares your breath when it goes thin. It's the sister who counts you when the paper won't. It's the brother who learns a new kind of math. It's a boss who keeps a stool in the back and pretends straws take a long time to count. It's an aunt who waits 20 years to hand you a bridge and lets you decide whether to cross. It's also sometimes a mother who chooses a lie she can carry and a daughter who learns to set it down. It's two people who could not be what the other needed when it would have been easiest and who are, with clumsy, mortal hands, trying to be something else now. If you are listening to this in the dark, if your house looks warm from the outside and cold from the stairs, if your birthday candle goes into a muffin and no one waits for the wish, this is me reaching out from my small roof with my scarf around my throat and my palm open. I see you. You are not a piece of furniture. You are not a mistake someone keeps paying for. You are a person with a map made of truths, and you are allowed to use it to leave, or to stay, or to do both on different days. I was treated like a stranger in my own family. That sentence will never be untrue. But it isn't the only sentence anymore. Now there are others. I counted myself. I opened the envelope. I asked the question. I wrapped the scarf twice. I learned the weather of my own chest and chose to go outside anyway. And in the quiet after the telling, when the kettle clicks and the room returns to its ordinary size, the scar lies down. It doesn't vanish. It doesn't sing. It rests. And for a while, that is enough.